well. So who am I? My name is Leon Mann, and I do lots of different things. I'm from North London, but I went to a school not too dissimilar to yourselves. I was obsessed with football. All I would want to do is play football before school, break time, after school, at the weekend. I was obsessed with football and obsessed with trying to become a footballer. Unfortunately, I wasn't good enough, but I found a different way to enjoy football that has taken me all around the world. So it's taken me to Nigeria, it's taken me to Thailand, it's taken me to Jamaica, it's taken me to the USA, and somebody has paid for my ticket and they have paid for me to go there and be involved in covering sport. So I started my career as an anti-racism campaigner in football. So actually we did an activation. It was a campaign called Kick It Out. Put your hands up for Kick It Out. Basically, the players wear t-shirts that have Kick It Out across it. That's how most people will remember it and recognise it now. So I went and worked for them, and my job with them was working with the media and was working in Europe. I ended up flying all around Europe, talking about football and talking about how we use football to bring people together and challenge racism. And it was an amazing job I did, and it was my first step into football. Because when I was young and obsessing about playing football, I thought that was the only way to get into football is to play football. But if you look at football, there's so many other jobs. So you've got the media, right? That's one big area. If you want to be an accountant, every football club has to be dealing with money. If you're a computer person, every club is using computer services, IT services. If you're into your community and want to do work in your community, every club has people that go into the community to work. So I didn't know this. I didn't think that there were possibilities to me. But actually, my eyes began to open later on in my life, and I wish that when I was your age, I had an understanding of the opportunities that there are to work in football, even if you don't make it. Very few people make it as a footballer, but that shouldn't be the end of your journey with football. If football is your thing, if that's what you love, it doesn't matter if you don't become a professional footballer, because you could be the person that runs the club. You could be the chief executive, or you could be a non-executive director coming in to help guide the vision of the club. You could be the doctor for the club. You could be the person changing lives in the community through the club. But these things didn't feel like an option for me because I didn't understand that there were ways to get into football beyond kicking ball on the pitch. Very fortunate to work for this campaign, Kick It Out. Went all up and down the country working around anti-racism in football, and then I had an opportunity to join the BBC. So I joined the BBC in the sports department, and before you knew it, I was doing some pretty amazing things. And so have you heard of a program called Football Focus? Then give us a show of hands if you've Football Focus. This is interesting, right? Okay, you can see the hardcore football fans. And I was working on that program, essentially. And by working on that program, I got to interview footballers up and down the country. So I would sit down opposite, you name the footballer, Didier Drogba. I'm sure you've all heard of him if you're a football fan. I went with him to the Ivory Coast. He took me around his village, he showed me everywhere, so I went there with him. I went to Thailand, a group of African footballers, to look at the development of football in Thailand and how they have relationships with countries across the continent of Africa, where they bring players across to Thailand. So I got to do some amazing things. And during that time, I began to make documentaries. But documentaries is a beautiful thing. Storytelling over the course of a longer period of time than your normal football focus feature. So I had the opportunity to sit down and really get into what it's like to be somebody. One of those people was Jermaine. So I told Jermaine Defoe's life story for ITV, and I ended up going to St. Lucia with him. You guys all familiar with St. Lucia? Island in the Caribbean. Very nice to get the opportunity to go there at any point in your life. I would strongly suggest you take it up. But St. Lucia is like super important to Jermaine because that's where his mum's family are from. So he took me back there with him to look at the places that are important to him in his life and how he's giving back to the island of St. Lucia, because obviously his football career went pretty well, and then it was important for him to give back. And as part of that, we did a number of different interviews. And I remember the first interview I did with him was like on a field where there was a reception where there's all these politicians and things. And I didn't know Jermaine that well at the time. And I remember I said, why is this important to you? Why is it important for you to be in St. Lucia? And it was really interesting because such a simple question evoked such an emotional answer. Jermaine started crying because he said, it's important for me to be here because of my grandparents. Because he has such a tight relationship with his grandparents. Actually being on the island and talking about it evoked this incredible emotion. That made fantastic TV. we don't normally see footballers crying, let's face it, if they lose a FA Cup final or the Champions League final or what's not. And we certainly don't see them reveal emotions about their families, etc., because that's generally not the setup for the footballing conversations that we have on a weekly basis. To be able to get the trust of a footballer to give you that emotion was a special thing. And then we came back to London, a part of East London, and we sat down for 4 hours just talking about his life. And to talk to anyone for 4 hours is a long period of time. Obviously, it's super interesting, but just to have the energy levels to keep talking to somebody, listening to what they're saying, which is such an important part of interviewing. It's not just what questions you ask, it's listening in. What are the things that they've said that you found interesting and you need to develop further to get more information, new information as a filmmaker, as a journalist, to be able to tell the story as accurately and as interestingly as possible. So Jermaine Defoe is amazing. Also made a life story on Andy Cole. Everyone heard of Andy Cole, Manchester United legend? Again, what a joy that was. Scored goals for fun, like Jermaine Defoe. My kind of generational striker. A lot of you probably would have been bored when he was scoring goals at the top of his game. But again, a character who was perceived as being quite cold. Cold because he was quiet, and it's okay to be quiet in life. In fact, I wish more people were quiet. But to get information from him, he had to give me a lot of trust. And that was based on asking respectful questions, asking the right questions, so he understood I wasn't just trying to get an emotion from him, that there was a reason why I was asking. There was a genuine interest in his life that goes beyond, can you do something interesting for me right now because I've got a camera and I need to get something in there. I also made a documentary on someone called Usain. I don't know if you've heard of Usain Bolt. Yeah, okay, getting some heads shaking. I'll be worried if you hadn't heard of Usain Bolt, to be honest. I was able to go to Jamaica, connect with his family, connect with him, find points of similarity, points of interest, and actually developed a relationship with his family and with him, and was able to make 2 documentaries on him. One with a sprinter called Michael Johnson fronting it, and another one which is called Can Anyone Beat Bolt, which is on BBC 3 many years ago. Understanding the people who are trying to beat him and understanding the mentality of someone who literally turns up and wins every race. But how do you mentally keep on top to keep performing at that level? So I've done some incredible things. I feel very blessed to have been able to do them. And I would say the reason why I've been able to do these things is because of my identity, because of my beliefs, and because of the way that I want to do things in a different way to others. And why do I say that? Because I believe things can always be done better depending on the situation that you're in. So while some people would say this is how you should film, and this is how you should ask questions, and this is how you should put something on television, I would challenge that to say, does that work for all the different audiences that you're trying to speak to? So if you're trying to speak to 65-year-olds and 70-year-olds, it might look and feel different in terms of the media that you put together than if you're trying to speak to 13 and 14-year-olds. I don't know, but maybe 70-year-olds are right now sat on TikTok and Snap and all that kind of stuff, just checking it out. I doubt it, but I imagine probably 13 and 14-year-olds might be using those platforms to consume content. And is there a world where you can communicate with all those different audiences to be able to bring people on a journey where they understand the stories, and the stories are interesting so they captivate your imagination? So while I've been on this kind of funny career journey, from an anti-racism campaigner through to making films, through to the Euros, I was a pitchside reporter. That's another crazy job, interviewing managers at the end of games and being pitchside. Anyone watching the Euros at the moment? Yeah, so you can see like people pitchside doing the interviewing, so Alex Scott's doing some of that, Laura Woods is doing some of that, and that was the job I was doing for ITV in 2016. And it's mad noisy. You can just about hear the person that you're speaking to. So you've got all of these challenges to take on technically, and by the same time you've got to ask people interesting things, you've got to listen to what they've said, and you've got a small amount of time to have interesting conversations. Because if you've just replicated what's happened in the studio, everyone's watching at home going, well, just listen to all of this. So we call it being editorially sharp, understanding what the story is and understanding how you fit within it. So within this journey of doing all these different jobs, one thing I identified was there was not a lot of people from the communities that I grew up in. And what I mean by that is I was going to the BBC, and while I was at the BBC, there were more people from Devon and Cornwall and Oxford than there were from parts of London that I grew up in. And I just found it really strange. because I thought, how can I be in this place with all these decisions to make, covering these sports stars that are from our communities, but I can't see many people that are from our communities making the content, fronting the content, involved in the storytelling, involved in the decision making. So I decided to do something which eventually we called BCOMS. So it's called BCOMS, and that is around diversifying the sports media. So we have a lack of representation in terms of people who are working in the sports media. So essentially you have a lot of people from all parts of the country, but largely not people from Black communities, not people from Asian communities, not many people from Latino communities, Turkish communities, white working class communities, women, people who have disabilities. There are just not a lot of people from those communities. And for me, I just found it really strange, particularly as we were in London, that we didn't have that representation. So I was like, you know what? I'm very sure people from all those communities that I've listed are quite interested in the sports media. I'm pretty sure, because the conversations that I have on the bus, the conversations I've had in my household, the conversations I've had in community groups, everyone has this real interest in sport and football and media. I can't believe that people wouldn't want to get into it. But what I was hearing from the bosses who do the employing is no one's applying for the jobs. And I'm saying, do they know about the jobs? Do they understand what a director is? Do they understand what a producer is? Do they understand what a broadcast assistant is? Do they understand the way to start that journey? Because if they don't, then how are we ever going to change what we look and sound like and feel like? So instead of waiting, I just set something up called BCOMS. And basically what we did is we got brilliant people together in a room and we built a network. So we began to help each other. And then we began to find where there were jobs and spread them within the community. And eventually what we began to do is we began to put on masterclass. So we would get a journalist, let's take a journalist, Darren Lewis, who writes for he does CNN, he also does the Mirror newspaper. And we would get him in a room with aspiring sports journalists who were about 18 to 25, some a little bit older. And we would get him to talk about how you get into the sports media. And we would get them to ask questions, like the audience. And then we would take people to Arsenal games. We would take people to Chelsea games. We would take people to Liverpool games, Manchester United games. And we would tell people when there were jobs. We would support people through job applications. And bit by bit, people began to get jobs. People began to network. And during that time, new platforms started to emerge. Anyone familiar with the platform Versus, which is on Instagram and Twitter? Maybe not social media heads right now to come. But these platforms started turning up where it was about what footballers were wearing, and what trainers are footballers wearing, what their fits are. You call it fits? It used to be outfits. No, it's just fits. And these accounts now are making crazy amounts of money, because Nike want to sell to you guys. So Nike know if they want to sell you Nike trainers, they're not going to tell me to go, guys, this is a great Nike trainer. They're going to go to Chunks and Philly and all these different influencers. They're going to go to all these different people that they believe that you're watching to go, this is a great trainer. And the way that they're going to do it is going to be a way that sells to you. So they need and want younger people to be able to become relevant, to make sure that they can remain as businesses. So that's really interesting when you think about it. They're trying to understand young people, but they ain't young, they're like me. So in terms of the business becoming successful, what do you think would be a good thing for them to begin to do in terms of the people that are working for them? Your thoughts? If you want to understand how a young person's brain works, do you want people like me sat around the table, or do you want people like you sat around the table? You get someone young. Get someone younger. How do we get an understanding of what you guys really want to consume, as in watch? So all of a sudden now, things are beginning to become really interesting in sports media, because there's actually a real ambition from lots of the big companies to go, we need to get younger people who understand content. We need to get younger people who understand the footballers and the sports people and the people that are being interviewed, so that we are connecting in a way that's more relevant. If we can create an interview between a younger sports journalist who understands the community that the footballer comes from, we're pretty sure that's going to be a better interview than the interview of someone who has no connection to the footballer, who looks like they're a school teachers, interviewing a student, as opposed to a conversation between young people that would actually be interesting to other young people. Does that make sense? So what I'm trying to say to you guys is it's a really good time to have an interest in these spaces, because these big companies now, no, it's a long time before you're going to be moving into the world of work, etc. And I say a long time, it happens pretty quickly. Keep these things in mind. But sometimes I used to feel when I was your age, oh my God, how would I ever do that? Why would they ever want me? That's how I felt. You might not feel that way, I hope you don't, but that's how I felt. But know that actually you are people that they want for business reasons, because they're going to pay you really good money, but that's because they're going to make money. So you will be an important part of the business if you choose to do that. So BCOMS, I started something called the Football Blacklist as well. It's a celebration of black culture within football. And it started about this many people in a room. Now the last event we had, sponsored by the Premier League, we had 700 people in there. Big production, international coverage all over the world. And so that's grown out over a period of time, which basically is highlighting to people that, yes, here is a footballer and they're very successful. Let's give them a round of applause for being successful. But here is a black doctor and her name is X, and she is working at Liverpool Football Club and she's doing amazing things. And guess what? You guys can follow in her footsteps to become a doctor at Liverpool Football Club if you want to. If you see people like you from your community, then sometimes that can act as a pretty good encouragement to say, if they can do it, I can do it. And when I was your age, there was a guy called Garth Crooks who played 400 games for Tottenham Hotspur, and there was a guy called Ian Wright who's still just about hanging on in there. Although he's not hanging on there, he's very good. I enjoy watching Ian Wright. And those guys, why did they get their jobs? They got their jobs because they played 400 games at the very highest level of football, right? They became very good at broadcasting and they're exceptional broadcasters. The message to me was, do you know what? If I want to work on TV, I better get good at football. And not even just good at football, I've got to be the best in the country at football and have an opportunity to be involved. Now that has changed. People who are rubbish at football, like me, end up on TV as well. You can just be very average at football and you can still work in the game and actually get paid more money than many of the footballers if you nail it. So my encouragement to you is, if you love football, if you love sport, don't just feel there is one lane for you to be involved in that profession. Know that there's about 100 lanes, and that's me being conservative with that estimate, for you to be involved in football. And how long do you think your career would last as a footballer? Well, any guesses? Go on. 20 years. I guess actually young, 38. So he's hanging on there. Ryan Giggs played to 43, but those are the exceptions, right? Most footballers average professional 7 years, 8 years, because you're talking about footballers at the very top of the Premier League that have long journeys. So it's good if you're right in terms of your answer's correct. But a lot of footballers, they play for 6 years and then someone works out they're not actually that good and they'll go and play for, I don't know, Bowling Road FC, and they'll get paid £15 a game because it's a competitive world and the next generation are coming. So a lot of footballers don't have long careers. You could be a journalist for 50 years. I'm not suggesting you want to be. Do you see what I'm saying in terms of like the longevity of how long you can stay in a career? And look, that footballer who did 7 years can then go on to have 50 years as a journalist as well. But what I'm saying to you is there are real opportunities to go for it in a sporting sense, but also there's so many other avenues to be excited. I should have done this at the beginning. So West Ham fans, hands up. Hang on. One West Ham fan, the stadium was like there. But okay, Arsenal, okay, this is getting more interesting. Right, my team, Tottenham Hotspur, not one hand, not one. That's all right, because the area that we're in, we shouldn't have any hands. Man United, okay. Some people are a bit sheepish about Man United this season. Let's see what's next season. Liverpool, we always get lots of Liverpool, right, okay. Actually, not that many. Please don't say Man City. No one's Man City, are they? Come on, be honest. Any Man City fans? I've got to say, I've got a talent company, and one of my clients is Yaya Toure. So, have you guys heard of Yaya? Yaya was smashing it in like 2014, and now he's the assistant manager for Saudi Arabia. And so I've got to Manchester City all the time, and those are passionate fans. But in terms of growing out the fan base, it's very different to a Manchester United or a Liverpool. But look, I've told you a little bit about my career. I've tried to make it as relevant to you as possible because I don't want to be the guy who comes in and says, oh, look, haven't I done? What I would want you to do is to hear little bits of my story that maybe get you thinking. Over the weekend, I could work in football in X or Y or Z, or I could be in the sports industry there. I could become a sports journalist, which is something I would say I've had an amazing time doing. Because we lose lots of exceptional people because they only feel there's one way to get to football, and that's by playing. So if you take one thing away from what I've just said, please keep in mind that the football industry is wicked to work in. I love it. It's a great place to work in, and this is an industry that needs more people from the communities that you live within. So actually right now, people are looking, saying, Leon, who have you got? Who could come and work for us at sports on this? Who have you got? Who could come and work for us at Arsenal Football? Who could come and work for us at West Ham? Because we want bright minds to come and shake up what we're doing to make sure that we're relevant to all the communities that we're trying to sell within, that we're trying to engage with. So I would keep that in mind. With any passion that you have, you can marry that up with football. And as a result of that, I have had a really great career to date, to the extent that I've got about 5 or 6 different businesses. I've got a production company, I've got a talent business, I've got a consultancy. I'm very blessed to have some brilliant people working with me to deliver against those things. I'm working with Premier League footballers, I'm working with Premier League legends, I'm working with chief executives that lead business. I sit on the board of the referees, so if you've got complaints about VAR, I can't answer any questions, but I am sat on the board of people that discusses what goes on with professional refereeing in the Premier League. There are lots of things that I've been blessed to do, and the reason why I have seats at those tables and have succeeded is because of the skills that my community gave me. The ability to sniff out the situation, the ability to listen, the ability to come with new ideas, with a new perspective, because other people are coming from similar perspectives. Those are the things that make me stand out. So I would encourage you to think about that in terms of things that will make you stand out, or the places that you've come from and the people that you are. So just give me an idea again, roughly how old are you guys? 15, okay. 15, definitely thought I was a good footballer, captain the school team, doing exceptionally well. But I was also, academically quite good. I didn't need to try that hard in school, which is a regret. So I could just try a little bit and get a B easy. And I'd feel like, if I push hard to get an A, it's just a bit of an effort. Do I really need to get an A? I can just get a B. That was my attitude, which is the wrong attitude, because I regret it, because I didn't push myself as far as I could academically to be able to get the opportunities that I saw others get. And I was like, hang on, why are they getting that? They got the A, you got the B. I was like, yeah, but I could have got an A. Yeah, but you didn't. So you can't have that. You can only have this. So I was in a place where I was convinced I was going to become a footballer, but actually there was no real evidence to back that up. Now it's different to what it was back up like then. Now, if you're 15, you'd be expected to be in an academy pretty much. We all live in this dream of Ian Wright became a professional footballer when he was 23, so you can still become a pro if you go through non-league football, etc. We all told each other that stories and encourage each other, but it's like 1 in a million, like Jamie Vardy, really difficult to do. You can still do it, but it's difficult to do. And what I was doing was, at the end of every game I'd play, I'd have a notebook and I'd write down how every single player had played. I'd write down, I'd do little lines in terms of where they were making runs and where they weren't making runs. And I didn't realise it, but that was a form of journalism. I'd write the story of the game. I'd say, this player did this. But I didn't recognise it as journalism. And because I didn't really see representation, I didn't feel I could actually become a sports journalist. I didn't know how. So at that point, it was all about becoming a footballer. And I think that changed later on in life, when you realise, you see your mates who have gone on to take corners for Arsenal, and you're watching on TV thinking, I haven't even played at the non-league grounds, and they're playing for Arsenal at 17. A guy called Paolo Benazza, who's a football agent now. We used to play football together, and he's taking a corner for Arsenal, and I'm sat on my sofa watching it, thinking I've not even played non-league football, and I think I'm going to become a footballer. And I spent some time living in Kenya, coaching football, and I think it was at that time that I really felt that I could do something interesting in the space, and I was beginning to recognise the signs that I had in terms of writing those match reports. But it wasn't actually until a bit later on in life where I had like a minor stroke. It's called Bell's palsy, and half my face dropped suddenly, just randomly. And at that point, it was like, tomorrow's not really promised. Anything can happen tomorrow. So I better get on with it today. Because if I don't do it today, if I don't get on with what I want to do now, I might not get an opportunity to do it today. That's how it made me feel. Now, I made a full recovery, but my mentality changed. I was just a different person. I was just like getting stuff done every single day as best as I can to give myself the best opportunity. That was the 14 to 18 journey. And I think at that time, it's best to just enjoy what you're doing and do as well as you can at it, because that will inform you in terms of where you can go from there. And in terms of my family, were actually like really supportive, but if I told them I wanted to be a sports journalist at that point, they probably would have laughed at me, because there was no precedent. It's so difficult to do. There was no pathway. Actually, it it would have felt quite unrealistic. Mum and dad support me with whatever I want to do, but it would have been like, yeah, just focus on this and this, and if this sports journalism thing happens, then great. But I was happy to challenge my parents in terms of, look, I'm going to do the schoolwork, but as part of this deal, you're also going to support me over here with this. This is how this is going to work. This is how it has to work for me. And actually, they were like, look, if you're doing your schoolwork and you're taking that serious, okay, show us that, and we'll show you the support and love. In terms of inspiration, there wasn't a black sports journalist to look up to. Like there just wasn't, right? So I looked at people like Nelson Mandela, right? So a world leader who was just like God, just like Nelson Mandela, alive. The things he'd been in prison for 25 plus years, it was crazy, but he still managed to be positive and push things forward. And I would idolise footballers, if I'm being completely honest. I'd just be like, wow, what were they doing? I dream of doing. So in terms of the inspiration, in terms of the sports media, it's something that I had to generate within myself. And I don't think as a black person, you don't have to see another black person to be inspired by that black person. So there are plenty of white sports journalists that I admired, Asian sports journalists that I admired. But in many ways, I had to be the change myself, although I didn't realise that. The opportunity came by knowing the right person. And that's often how it works. You have to have qualifications, you have to be a professional person, but a lot of the time it's like in the media, you get introduced to somebody, they quite like you, and then when there's an opportunity that comes up, they go, something's coming up. So for me, it was a senior woman at the BBC who I'd worked with through the work that I'd done through Kick It Out, and I'd said to her that, you know what, at some point soon, because I've been here for 6 years. And she was like, what do you want to do? I said, I'd love to work in the media. And she said, if something comes up at the BBC, I'll let you know. Anyway, I took the pay cut, went to the BBC, and within a year, I was earning more than I was earning in the job that I'd left. So it all made sense because I got a promotion really quickly to be able to get to the next level. Without that one person who believed in me, and then I had to go for an interview and everything, that's just the process. But without that person helping me, I'm not quite sure when I would have got in or how. So it takes someone to believe in you, but then that's why it's so important that you're getting in rooms with people who can make decisions, number one, and then when you're in the room with people that can make decisions, you're presenting yourself in the best possible way, because they will be making decisions about it. So your teachers will tell you about punctuality. If you're the person who walks in late and you want something from someone, wow, you've got to be impressive. Like, you've got to be seriously impressive. If you turn up late, that person is not the person for me. Unless they ask 10 questions, which are the best questions in the session, and I can see the potential in them. And then I can put them aside and say, I can see that you could be better than a load of people. Let's work on your punctuality. Because sometimes there's good reasons for being late, but people don't necessarily know that. So you've got to understand how people perceive you. But then when you're in the room, are you giving the best of yourself? Because people make quick decisions, rightly and wrongly, and you wouldn't even know it yourself. So someone has to give you a chance. So think about that when you're in those situations. Be brave. Any other questions?
You are really a big proponent of diversity in the media. What do you think the impact of more diversity in the media will be when there is more diversity?
Yeah, I mean, there's academic studies that prove if you have a diverse group of people, your business performs better. And the reason for that is if you have a lot of people who think similarly, you just go, yeah, and you don't think in a thorough way. So by challenging people, you get to better. So if you're debating who's better, Messi or Ronaldo, right? If everyone believes Messi is the best player around the table, it's a bit of a boring conversation, let's face it. If you've got half the table saying Ronaldo, half the table saying Messi, then you're debating all of that and you're getting deep. You're getting deep into it because you're having to prove your argument. You're having to prove, no, Messi's way better than Ronaldo because of X, Y, Z. So what you're doing is you're getting deep into the information and you're getting a better understanding. So if you apply that to how do we make more money, and you have diverse people around the table with different opinions on how to make more money, then actually you're having lots of different discussions, right? So that's the kind of the science, if you like, behind why diversity is better for performance. And in terms of the sports media, I think we can see it now. While it's not as diverse as I would like it to be, it's certainly become a lot more diverse. And you can see in the types of content that are turning up. Like back when I was a producer, every track would be some kind of like Oasis kind of like strum thing, because literally all the producers were people who loved Oasis. Now you've got all sorts of different instrumentals, different techniques of making content, the things that EA Sports were doing, now the BBC are doing. Now EA Sports were doing it because they were like, geez, we need to sell these games to young people. So having someone sat under a spotlight going, I like playing EA Sports games, it's really good, is not the way to sell to young people. The way to sell to young people is bish bash, all of this kind of stuff going on that is attractive to a younger audience. So the BC, maybe we should get some of the producers who've been making content for the likes of EA Sports, etc., or begin to get people who understand that world better, and then we see a different kind of content that turns up on our channel. So already we're seeing and feeling the impact of it. When I started in sports journalism, there was no social media, crazy, the Facebook day. But now, like, people are spending hundreds and thousands of pounds on content that goes just on Instagram and goes just on TikTok, right? So the whole industry has been completely shook up by this. And as a result of that, it's had to become diverse because they haven't had people that can make content for those channels. So I've already seen those changes and I'm excited about what comes later. And a lot of people within the industry at the moment are worried because they're like, I don't know if I fit this world. But actually I think there's a space for everything. Like, my dad is going to spend money on content, but he's not interested in a piece of content that looks like EA Sports advert, right? He wants a different piece of content. So that person can still supply that for them so they have a place in the industry. If you can edit on your phone, how many of you guys edit on your phone? Do you make little bits of content and edit things? That's nothing that we could do when we stepped in. We didn't have a clue about editing. How much do you think an editor gets paid in the industry? 40k a year. I'll give you some money talk, because this is the kind of thing that can be a motivator. So largely camera operators, and lots of people say cameramen, but we should say camera operators, because not everyone is a camera man, camera women, but camera operators is just the best way to say it. So normally you pay between £650 a day to the top ones, maybe you pay them like £1,000, £1,200 a day, right? If you're good, times that by how many days, right? So the camera operator who's at the Euros right now, earning £850 a day, times how many days are there in the Euros? 6-7 weeks? 5-6 weeks? I don't know who's the mathematician in the room, but it's not bad money, right? The person who sits in the dark room doing the editing, how much do you think they get paid? For about 450 quid a day. These are people you don't see. They're the people who have the camera on the shoulder. It's the person who sits in the dark room. It's not the person who's sitting in front of camera as the celebrity, as one person. These are people in their hundreds, thousands of things. At the Olympics, there are thousands of people work. This is the information that a lot of people don't have within our communities. So while you might be amazing at editing things on your phone, you wouldn't know that could lead to you being sat in an edit, earning £450 a day, working at the Olympics over 6 weeks, earning quite a lot of money, and then going on to work on the Euros before that, and then going on to work on programs on a weekly basis. These are things which I think I wish I'd have known, because I might have sharpened up some of my skills while I was in education to be able to give me the best opportunity to get to where I need to get to.